John Dickerson is CBS News chief Washington correspondent and Face the Nation moderator. So, John, it is somewhat unusual to get an opening statement like this far in advance. How do you think that is going to shape the questions from members of the Senate Intelligence Committee?
It's also unusual for an opening statement to actually be interesting, which is usually not what we get. I think what it will do is all the facts of the case are basically there. And so what has happened is sometimes the facts that have been disclosed in a hearing can get shredded by the grandstanding, by the politicization of it. So this is all out there ready to go. So it might lead to more pointed questioning. It also suggests that Director Comey, former Director Comey, won't have anything blocking his ability to basically tell the facts as he understands them. So it gets the story out there in a cleaner way than maybe during a regular hearing might.
So in his remarks, Comey says, quote, "My instincts told me that the one-on-one setting and the pretense that this was our first discussion about my position meant the dinner was, at least in part, an effort to have me ask for my job and create some sort of patronage relationship. That concerned me greatly, given the FBI's traditionally independent status in the executive branch." Those conversations between Comey and President Trump, do they seem out of the ordinary for a commander-in-chief and an FBI director?
They do, and they were so out of the ordinary that James Comey took notes after these meetings took place. He advised his advisors. He asked the Attorney General to intercede and not have these conversations take place. He notes very carefully in his opening statement that he spoke to President Obama twice in 4 years, but he spoke to President Trump 9 times in 4 months. So what's interesting about that is here you have a serious person, the head of the FBI, taking measures in private because he was so upset or unsettled by this. So that's in terms of basically at the end of the day here, this is what the president says happened versus what James Comey says happened. But the fact that he took those measures, which are verifiable, the notes he took and the superiors that he talked to, establish a fact pattern in the moment that is basically unassailable. And so since a lot of this is what's going to happen in the theater of politics and in the court of public opinion, here you have James Comey, who is so undone that he took these measures, versus the president who says, well, there was nothing untoward there. So that is that's kind of an important part of this drama because basically there's going to be the disputed fact, but that's something that's kind of hard to dispute, and it sends a message about just how extraordinary these contexts were.
Well, where do these remarks fit in with the possibility of an obstruction of justice charge?
Well, on the one hand, they clear up some things. The president said he'd like the investigation to be moved along because of the cloud it was creating. Well, that's a pretty vague claim, but James Comey also says that he felt there was a direct and specific request to end the investigation into Michael Flynn and whether he'd said things that were not true. So that is a specific effort. And then I think finally the big question is not just the details in the 7 pages that James Comey released in his opening statement, but Comey's firing itself. Because in the first meeting where Comey talks about that patronage relationship, a signal that was so strong, again, that Comey was undone by it, that patronage relationship had 2 things. One, you give me your loyalty and do as I ask. And you can keep your job, basically. So loyalty and job were mentioned in that first meeting. It threads through all their future conversations. So then when Comey is fired for not doing what the president wanted him to do, then that raises the question, well, was he obstructing the investigation by firing Comey? And the fact pattern, supports that argument, at least from the perspective of the former FBI director, and of course that's important to remember. This is just one side of the story.
Right. So President Trump announced on Twitter Wednesday his new pick for FBI director. The president also said he plans to live tweet during Comey's testimony. Is there a strategy, you think, there? Or is this just sort of the president that we have come to know? Well,
I mean, the strategy on the one hand is pretty obvious, which is basically counter-programming. The wisdom of the strategy would seem to be, on the one hand, the president wants to get his voice out, and this is a story with 2 sides. The downside risk for the president is that at its heart, this is a question about impulsivity. The president's basically not following the rules, even after he'd been told them, about how you're supposed to interact with your FBI director. And that's also a question that looms across the president's entire presidency. And so to live tweet, who knows, perhaps they will be each one be a polished jewel. But if they underlie or add support to that idea that he is impulsive, then he's sort of in the moment giving more weight and evidence to the underlying claim, which would seem not to be in his interest.
All right, we will be watching closely. John Dickerson, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks, Elaine.